Ladies and gents, boys and girls, welcome. Thursday, December the 21st, 2023. Hope you are all doing well. Chris Phillips here, your host of the Daily Crow of the Spurs Up Show. I see Rebecca, Ethan K, Xavier, Billy Cotton, Lucas Green. What's going on? Hope you guys are doing well. Also, those in our Discord, head over to the TDC Questions channel. The TDC Questions channel. Be sure your questions are answered there. Chuck, good day to you as well, sir. Merry Christmas. Merry early Christmas to you all. We're just 4 days away from Christmas Day. You know, it's crazy to think about as we're so wrapped up and everything happening with content and business and sports and what have you that Christmas is just 4 days away, guys. That's crazy to think about, but it is just around the corner. Do not forget, we will be live tomorrow, guys. The final TDC before the Christmas holiday. So again, we'll be really excited to chat with you all. Got a fun show planned, excuse me, already for tomorrow, guys. We're going to talk about what each and every single SEC team is asking Santa Claus for Christmas this year. Again, guys, thank you all so much for tuning in. If you have not done so, be sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube, hit that bell icon so you get notifications when we go live. We drop new video content as well. Also, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast. Be sure also leave us 5 stars. It helps boost the podcast, helps others find the show as well. And of course, stay tuned, guys. Follow along on social media. Content bleeding out of the eyeballs there as always. Guys, again, got a jam-packed show today. We're kicking things off with our good friend Jake Crain, who is going to call in a couple of minutes. After that, guys, we're going to talk Citrus Bowl, Tennessee, and Iowa. We're also going to talk SEC schedules for the 2024 season. That's something, guys, I wanted to get into all week long. We've been so slammed. I have not been able to discuss it, have not been able to talk about it. We're going to talk about the most difficult schedules, my top 5 toughest schedules in 2024 for these SEC teams. And believe it or not, guys, the Gamecocks didn't make the top 5. So stick around for that. Also, guys, end of show, we're taking your questions, your comments, and your voicemails in our daily mailbag segment. So again, lots to get into, guys. Really exciting show. Again, our good friend Jake Crain is going to call us in just a moment, the next minute or two. And again, looking forward to that. Guys, again, thank you all so much for the continued love and support. Obviously, yesterday was a great day for content, great day for business. From the live show to the clips to everything we produce, guys. A lot of engagement there. So again, guys, I appreciate you all tuning in. Thank you all so much for the love and support. A lot of fun yesterday. And again, that continues today. Bird Toffley asking the questions, is 24/7 and On3 the same recruiting services? Or are they different? They are 2 separate companies, Bird. They are 2 separate companies, 2 completely separate entities. So their rankings, their services, what have you, they are totally separate from each other. I see our good friend Robbie Davis, the Hall of Famer, in the chat. What's going on, Robbie? Appreciate you tuning in. Chris Rivers, what's the balance as a team, in your opinion, after signing day and current transfers from the portal? The balance? I don't know what you mean exactly by balance in regards to balance of the team. South Carolina, though, guys, right now as it sits, let's see, sits 20th nationally in recruiting. The recruiting rankings, Gamecocks 20th in recruiting rankings, 12th right now in the transfer portal rankings. Was actually really surprised to see that South Carolina has fallen or did fall that far. Quite a fall in the transfer portal rankings. But again, other teams are moving up. Other teams are picking up players, and you expect that to happen. All right. With that being said, guys, he joins us every single week this week on Thursday.
Call from
Jake.
Our good friend Jake Crain joins the show. Jake, what's going on, my man? How are you?
Man, doing great. Just getting ready for a little bit of Christmas action. I'm almost done shopping, so I almost feel good about it.
Yeah, I was going to ask, Jake, what are your Christmas plans? Do you have any big asks on the Christmas list? Anything you're looking forward to getting from Santa Claus this year?
Well, look, I think I've been pretty good. Number one, I've tried to be as good as humanly possible. Right now, my wife is actually redoing my man cave / studio. I haven't been able to go in there for like the last week and a half, so I'm excited to see that reveal. And I already got her a puppy earlier, so that counts as a gift. But man, I mean, I'm easy. I'm not going into it. Maybe a new grill or something like that, but we'll see.
I love that, man. We actually got a new grill. We moved in the house back over the summer. That was a moving in gift, if you will. So I think I used up my.
Talk about signing day.
Yeah.
Talk about signing day. I've been taking official visits up to Lowe's and stuff, and just looking around. So we'll see where I commit.
Well, Jake, you mentioned signing day. Let's go ahead and get into that. I saw you talk this morning about Alabama, Georgia. It is kind of interesting how, signing day for those top 5 or top 10 teams, it's a different experience for everyone else, right? Signing day. Like you ask somebody if they get into recruiting, if they're a diehard recruiting person, and if you are a fan of a school that is signing 5-star after 5-star after 5-star, it's really easy, right, to get invested in recruiting. But either way, National Signing Day yesterday, I think you and I would probably agree, the transfer portal and NIL and such, it's a different dynamic now. It's a much different vibe than it was, say, 10 or 15 years ago, but still National Signing Day is like an early Christmas for college football fans at this point. What were your biggest takeaways as a whole? I know Auburn had a really good day flipping some guys. This is probably one of the best wide receiver classes they've brought in quite some time. I think what's really interesting, Jake, is you look at the national recruiting rankings, and it's almost like if you're in the SEC, you should completely ignore the national rankings because that is nothing but an ego boost because you can be 15th nationally and you can brag about that, but you can be 12th in the SEC. So it's like, what real traction what real ground did you make up, if you will? So biggest winners, biggest losers, overall, your biggest takeaways from National Signing Day yesterday.
Well, I think one of the biggest takeaways, not even from signing day, but from recruiting in 2023 is, I mean, you look at how many guys were uncommitted. There's really not a lot. And the reason for that is because, you have the transfer portal, obviously, but you're able to play 12 years in college football now. So there's not as many spots for these high school guys and JUCO guys and prep school guys. We were talking about it with Tom Luganville earlier in the week. I mean, you had what? There's like less than 20 uncommitted guys in the top 100 going into signing day. I mean, you never used to see that. But as far as winners, it's like I said this morning on the show. I mean, I guess if you're like an Alabama fan or a Georgia fan or an Ohio State fan, it's like a rich kid waking up on Christmas. Like, you're getting great stuff, and there's going to be some awesome surprises too. Like, you're never not going to get what you want or not have enough presents. But outside of your typical, top dogs, I would say a winner, you have to throw Miami in there with what they were able to do. I mean, if you'd have told me that Florida State would have gone undefeated and Miami would have had more momentum than they would going into National Signing Day, I would have thought you were crazy before the college football playoff reveal. So you got to throw Miami in there. Oregon had a big day, and I don't think they're done. Obviously, Auburn, you finished with the 7th-ranked overall class and the number 1 wide receiver class. And they filled some positions of need. And they got some guys coming back too. That was announced that was pretty big. But losers, I mean, I don't know how you look at Florida State and Miami and feel better about, or Florida State, I'm sorry, and Florida and look better about it. I mean, Florida I think they had the 3rd-ranked overall class going into it, dropped down to 16. Florida State ended up not signing a 5-star in the whole class. But I mean, look, Texas Tech, I thought was a winner. They're sneaking their way up the rankings consistently. UCF, I thought had a really good day. But yeah, man, it's so different now. And to be honest with you, you don't get a true sense of how good the class is unless you combine the transfer portal ranking with the recruiting ranking out of high school, because we know the effect that the transfer portal has on rosters now. And we can't make that ranking until the transfer portal window closes.
Jake, to your point, you do have to factor in transfer portal rankings, and let's talk transfer portal and what specifically Ole Miss has done over the last couple of weeks. Your thoughts and impressions on what Lane Kiffin's doing in Oxford, I think, continues to prove that he's somewhat the king of the transfer portal. Of course, added Juice Wells from South Carolina, Tyler Barron from Tennessee, Walter Nolan potentially is going to commit. I mean, it's just one guy after another. Your thoughts on the work that Kiffin's doing via the portal?
Well, look, I mean, if we're talking about just high-profile guys that are getting brought in, yeah, I mean, Lane Kiffin's killing it. You know, he's one of the few coaches that is running this experiment out to see if you can just flip the roster pretty much every year. But I will say, with the amount that Ole Miss has coming back that we've already seen on both sides of the ball, I can understand why he's being heavier on the transfer portal this year, because they can make a serious run at it next year. I truly believe that. But some of these coaches that are kind of taking the college basketball route and saying we'll just rebuild the roster every year, I personally don't think you can maintain a high level of success that way. But it's impossible to know because we've never seen it happen over a certain amount of time. So, yeah, I mean, if we're going to go off high-profile names, proven commodities, I mean, what Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss is doing going into a year next year where their schedule is one of the lighter ones in the SEC, I mean, I think you could get some pretty good returns in a 12-team playoff.
Jake, I want to get your live reaction to this in case you missed it. KJ Bolden has flipped back from Georgia to Florida State. Your live reaction thoughts to that?
What?
Yes. This coming
like
from
he just flipped back?
Oh, actually, you know what I got? I got Jake. I got to admit.
Okay.
Somebody
I thought he signed.
Somebody in the Discord shared a fake link, fake Hayes Fawcett X account. That's why you got to be careful out here, man. That's why you got to be careful.
Oh, God, he pulled a Rashard Mendenhall and fumbled at the worst time.
Yes, I got. Let's keep it moving with Auburn, man. Again, you're an Auburn man. We already talked about the wide receiver class. What do you think they're going to do in regards to quarterback? I know the name KJ Jefferson has floated around. I don't know if that's realistic or not, or if Hugh Freeze would even want him, but your thoughts on what Hugh is building. I mean, obviously, I think for them to finish what you said, 7th nationally, 4th in the SEC, that's a hell of a signing class for his first full class there on the Plains.
No, without a doubt, they had to have it. And look, when you can offer NIL and playing time at a place like Auburn, you're going to get some good returns. But I thought the staff did a really good job of filling needs. Now, when it comes to quarterback, I mean, I'll be honest, it's looking like Peyton Thorne. Now, you know, anything could happen. We know with the transfer portal and the craziness that's brought. But the thing with Peyton Thorne, and I'll continue to say this, I don't think Peyton Thorne can be the focal point of your offense or the guy you're counting on the most or your best playmaker and you go win the SEC. But I do think if you put the right pieces around him with his running ability, and you have guys like Cam Coleman, who I think is going to come in and play. You have guys like Perry Thompson, who I think is going to come in and play. You return basically your whole offensive line. You're really good in the running back room. And Rivaldo Fairweather, to me, is going to be probably a top 5 tight end prospect going into the NFL draft next year. You can put Peyton Thorne in a position to be able to be effective enough offensively with those weapons around them to win the SEC. It's like we used to say, don't be the reason, but be the difference. So it's looking like Peyton Thorne with Robbie Ashford hitting the transfer portal. I think the perfect scenario for Hugh Freeze and Auburn with what's going on is you signed Walker White, big-time quarterback coming out of high school, more in the mold of what Hugh Freeze and them want. He comes in this first year. He's your backup. You're able to get him some reps while redshirting him. Peyton Thorne takes that next step, and then you pass it down to Walker White going into the next year. So that's what it kind of feels like to me.
Jake, you've mentioned many times the parity in college football this year and that you hope it continues, obviously, going into 2024 and beyond. You look at recruiting, you look at the portal, I feel like there's no reason that it shouldn't, right? I look at a team, again, like an Ole Miss. I look at Missouri, what Eli Drinkwitz is doing. I mean, I think they're continuing to build positive momentum, and they're going to be bringing key guys back led by Brady Cook and Luther Burden next year. Do you feel confident that the parity will continue, or do you fear that we'll revert back to just 3 or 4 dominant teams? I mean, I feel like we're set up pretty well to keep this thing going in regards to the competitiveness and the parity going into the first year, the 12-team playoff.
Well, I mean, you know, despite being an Auburn fan, I'm an optimist. So I'm hoping this is the new normal. I hope this isn't just a combination of, you know, a lot of teams having to replace quarterbacks at pretty big time places, along with obviously the transfer portal and things like that. I think expanding to the 12-team playoff is going to help parity over time. But what we've seen with the transfer portal is kind of a lifting of everybody's floor right? I mean, the rich are always going to get richer. That's the way it works. But it feels like everybody's floor kind of got lifted by being able to bring in experienced guys at important positions to come in and try and roll over a roster. So, and again, I mean, you got guys that can play for 12 years now in college football. So you have more experienced guys to pass around at the quarterback position too. But I do think this is going to be the new normal. I hope it's the new normal. But would I be shocked if for the next 2 or 3 years there was only truly 2 or 3 teams that could win it? No, because I look at the recruiting rankings.
Jake, now you've coached obviously at the collegiate level. You know what these coaches go through, and you know it's a results-oriented business, right? And it can be cutthroat at times. There are South Carolina fans right now, and I'm sure there's fans of other schools who had less than stellar seasons, but there are Gamecock fans specifically that are frustrated that there have been no coaching changes, whether it be a defensive coordinator, running backs coach, what have you. And, of course, National Signing Day just took place yesterday. And, again, the rumor mill continues to be hot about what changes Shane Beamer may make, what changes fans think he needs to make. Can you speak to just what it's like to be on a staff and like, you know, people are the contracts, everybody's talking about the contracts in January 1st, and maybe after the turn of the new year, there will be changes, there will be things that happen or what have you. And certainly we know we're going into a pivotal year 4 with Shane Beamer and what he needs to do in Columbia. But I mean, can you just speak to what that's like, I guess, going through the ringer? And I'm sure you've seen it before firsthand of coaches and coordinators and people being on the chopping block. And I mean, it's a cutthroat business no matter how you slice it.
No, without a doubt. And obviously, you know, we just had signing day as well. It's a lot easier to sign players when you have continuity on your coaching staff as opposed to having to bring a brand new guy in. And listen, it's not I'm not saying Shane Beamer is doing this, but I think that goes into the calculus along with when the contract ends as well. That's something you got to think of now with the new signing day being in December. But here's the way it works. It's something that, you know, you hate to see it being on a coaching staff because that means it didn't go well. And when it doesn't go well for one guy, it doesn't really go well for everybody else. And you're all in it together. You put in these crazy hours, the amount of time away from your family. But as a coach, you realize that this is how business works. The head coach obviously wants to keep his job. The coordinators want to keep their job. So if somebody has to go, it typically goes assistant coaches, then coordinator, then head coach. So they're not going to fire themselves. It's kind of an understanding, especially if, you know, your group didn't perform up to task. I would say if there are no changes made, even after the first of the year, it tells me 2 things. It says, 1, Shane is obviously confident in the staff that he has. And 2, he knows he has to win regardless, I guess, because if you're not going to make any changes, then regardless of what you say at press conferences, it kind of does seem acceptable with how things went. I mean, I saw him say the other day, you know, for 16 straight years, you've been getting ready for a bowl game this time of year, and this year you're not, and that's not acceptable. Well, if you don't make any changes, then on one hand, you're kind of saying it's acceptable.
Jake, that is a drop the mic moment, I think, for sure. And we'll see what Shane Beamer does, no doubt. But either way, it's results on the field are what are going to determine his future, and whether he makes changes or not, I know that is the case. Jake, last week, the 2024 SEC schedules were released game by game, if you will. Your initial reactions to that, you know, I think there's obviously some you look and there's some gauntlets out there, man. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to be talking about Georgia's schedule going into next year. South Carolina's got to go to Alabama, to Oklahoma, back-to-back weeks. What jumped out to you? Was there anything specifically that you took away from that initial schedule release?
Well, I mean, all you did was add just another damn to the schedule. You know, typically you read SEC schedules, you're like, man, you know, it's tough. But you just added another one. I mean, with Texas and Oklahoma. The Florida schedule, I mean, goodness gracious, man. I mean, that you definitely pulled the Ben Affleck short end of the stick at the end of Armageddon on that one, and I don't think Bruce Willis is going to push you back in that little elevator, especially not with what just happened on signing day with Billy. But man, it's all tough, right? I would say Ole Miss's is probably lighter, as I'm at Missouri's. I think is a little bit lighter, but I mean, it is just an absolute. I am, especially after what happened to Florida State. Like, I am not scheduling anybody good in the non-conference ever again if I'm in the SEC. And we're going to go to a 9-game in-conference schedule at some point. Yeah, but y'all think y'all got pissed off when everybody played like Alabama A&M and like, SC LSU like the week before the last week? I'm going to get 3 weeks of cupcakes. I'm turning my schedule into a bakery in the non-conference.
So, Jake, I want to get into this really quickly. This morning it came out. Florida State is taking action. Their board of trustees, they're to approve a legal filing on Friday, the first step in an exit from the ACC, that coming from Bud Elliott. Your thoughts on the action that Florida State is taking? I think obviously this is sparked from not just because of this, because I think for years they've probably been wanting to get out or eyeing an exit, but obviously with the latest college football playoff stuff, them getting left out, it looks like FSU is looking for an exit. Do you think they could potentially be a team that Greg Sank and the SEC look at adding in the future?
Yeah, I mean, look, if they get out of it, just the Big Ten just doesn't make a lot of sense to me, right? I think the SEC would want to take in Florida State, but I think you got to be able to take in another one with them. I don't think this is a take one team, and now we're at 17 teams. I mean, I like that nice even number. Maybe that's the OCD in me. But listen, if I'm Florida State, yeah, we went undefeated and they kept us out. Why are we still in this group of 5 conference? Like, I was already pissed earlier. We already wanted to leave. This party sucked. And now, y'all didn't even bring any alcohol. So we're out of here. I wouldn't blame them. I'd have been trying to get out the minute I saw that Alabama A on the 4th spot in the playoff reveal. But yeah, I don't blame them at all. If I'm Clemson, I'm trying to get out. If I'm Miami, we're getting out of this. Was like the final nail, right? The final nail, I think, in some of these top teams in the ACC, because you basically got weighed, measured, and you were left wanting.
Jake, speaking of that Alabama A, we're just over, I should say, a week away from kickoff. Alabama and Michigan, Texas and Washington. Have you locked in your college football playoff picks yet? And if so, who do you got? And who's your national champion at this point? Or at least which way are you leaning?
Well, I picked Michigan at the beginning of the year, so I'm gonna stick with that. I'm gonna dance with the one that brought me. But the more I look at this Bama-Michigan game, the worse I feel about it for Michigan. I haven't made my pick yet. I just stylistically, I don't think it's a good matchup for them with what Alabama does. Alabama's very Jackson Pollock with great athletes, and Michigan is very like Andy Warhol. Georgia was very Andy Warhol, and it just didn't work out. I mean, Alabama hit him on those improv plays a bunch. I look at Texas and Washington. I mean, really, who gets the ball last, man? That's what it feels like to me. I think Texas is a little bit better than Washington is up front on both sides of the ball, but I mean, Washington is so elite at the quarterback and skill position, and they show up in big games, man. I've bet against them twice against Oregon. They proved me wrong twice. But Texas and Quinn Ewers, I mean, you look at what they have on the outside. It's no joke with what they got. So I haven't locked in my picks officially. I'm leaning Bama, Texas in the Natty. I'm leaning that way, but I'm not all the way in, Chris. I'm gonna have to just sit down and stare outside and think about it a little bit more.
Those who have SEC fatigue would not be getting any relief if it were Alabama and Texas. That is for sure.
Yeah, because since we claim them now, you're ours now. Yeah. It's past January 1st, so you're ours now.
Yeah, I mean, you're
all SEC final.
Yeah, and you're already listed in the recruiting rankings and stuff. I mean, Texas is basically already in. So
we'll take it.
So yeah, for sure.
Yep.
Jake, we didn't get your thoughts on this last week. The Gamecocks did make a splash in the transfer portal when they added Rocket Sanders from Arkansas. Your thoughts on this edition? I've been really intrigued by, obviously locally in Gamecock circles, it's been a move that most everyone I would say has praised. We all know what Rocket did in 2022 when he was healthy. I've been really intrigued though, Jake, and maybe it's just the contrarian in me, and I like to run to the banter and some different opinions, but I've been intrigued by those outside of Gamecock circles that have been somewhat critical of the addition, or maybe they're not sold on it because of the offensive line struggle. So where do you fall on the Rocket Sanders ad, and does it make all that much of a difference if Carolina can't block any better than they did in 2023?
Yeah, no, it doesn't make a difference. I mean, Rocket Sanders is a good back. He's got to stay healthy. That's probably his biggest bugaboo has been injuries. But as far as being a quality back, he's better than what South Carolina has had, especially last year.
down the stretch. Now, when I look at the offensive line, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and think you're going to set the bench press record if you don't have any arms. I mean, you know, you got to be able to sit down and grab the bar at least. And if you don't have anybody that can block for you, or you're as bad as what South Carolina was last year, it doesn't matter. That's why football is the greatest sport that God ever put on this planet. It's the ultimate team sport. If one part of the organism doesn't work, the other one isn't going to work. So without anybody that can block, a running back can't run. Without anybody that can protect, a quarterback can't throw. That's what made Spencer Rattler did so impressive to me. And I think he even though his year wasn't incredible, it was a little bit underrated with what he had in front of him. So, yeah, I don't need to be sold on Rocket. I need to be sold on the offensive line.
Jake Crain of Crain and Company joined us every single week throughout 2023. Jake, Merry Christmas to you and yours. Happy New Year. Look forward to doing it more in 2024. And the last thing, Jake, I'll leave you with is this. I heard your segment with Mark Ryan this week, and I agree with you. I think a decal is a sticker.
Thank you. It's so simple. If I could just get these clowns that I talk with every morning to understand that, it'd be a whole hell of a lot easier. But no, Merry Christmas to everybody out there. You made it through. Next year, I got to see what they do in the portal, but I think it's going to be better for South Carolina. But no, I appreciate you guys and having me on, and look forward to next year. We got to get you on Crain and Company next year.
Yeah, man. Let's do it. Let's do it. Jake, I appreciate you, man.
All right. All right, buddy.
All right, brother. We'll talk soon. Great stuff. Our good friend Jake Crain of Crain and Company, his final appearance in the 2024 calendar year. And guys, it's always a pleasure to chat with Jake. Really, truly. I know for many of you guys out there, he is your favorite guest. And certainly I understand why it's always a fun conversation with our good friend Jake Crain. Guys, that being said, we're going to jump into a quick break. On the other side, who has the toughest schedule in the SEC going into the 2024 season? I won't just talk about that. I'll break down my top 5 toughest SEC schedules in 2024. Guys, all that and more on the other side of this break. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow.
Muscle Dougie, ho. Macho Dougie, ho.
Ladies and gents, boys and girls, we are back here on this Thursday, December the 21st, 2023. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. Want to say thank you yet again to our good friend Jake Crain of Crain and Company for taking the time to chat. Always a legendary conversation with Jake. And again, we appreciate him in 2023 for all of his guest appearances and look forward to more of it in 2024. Guys, you keep the conversation rolling, keep the comments, questions, everything else rolling in. Guys, I'll have more for you all tomorrow in regards to an update on what next week's live show schedule looks like. It will be different. It will be altered. And don't forget, we got a big announcement dropping late in the show tomorrow. Really excited about. But yeah, I'll let you guys know, obviously, with the Christmas holiday, stuff like that. We'll be out of town, hanging out with family, all that good stuff. So things will be different. They will be altered, but rest assured, content bleeding out of the eyeballs all week next week for sure as SEC Bowl games officially begin. So again, guys, continue to flood the chat line, the comments, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, and of course, if you're in the Discord, the TDC Questions channel. You can leave your questions there, and we will get into those. Guys, with that being said, who has the toughest schedule in the SEC in 2024, guys? I'm going to give you not just the toughest, but my top 5 toughest SEC schedule. Of course, guys, these were dropped last week, right? The full SEC slate just over a week ago or so to the date. So we're going to get in this, our top 5 as you look at these schedules. And guys, there's no such thing as an easy schedule in the SEC, but certainly not all of these schedules are created equally. And there are some that are some absolute gauntlets. So we start at number 5, the 5th toughest schedule in the SEC. And again, this is all my opinion, if you will. There's many SEC fan bases out there that can argue it. But at number 5, I've got the Mississippi State Bulldogs. And you go through their slate, guys. They open up with Eastern Kentucky, then at Arizona State in week 2, Toledo in week 3. Then they've got the Florida Gators in Starkville to open up SEC play. Then they're at Texas, an open date on October the 5th. Then at Georgia, Texas A&M, Arkansas, UMass. Then at Tennessee, open date on November the 16th. Guys, do not forget all SEC teams are getting 2 bye weeks this year. So that open date on the 16th. Then Missouri on November the 23rd and at Ole Miss on November the 30th. But again, guys, you look at this schedule, the road games, at Texas, at Georgia, at Tennessee, and at Ole Miss. You miss Alabama, but at what cost, right? At what cost? A really, really tough draw for year 1 of the Jeff Lebby era in Starkville. And again, guys, you look at the non-conference. I know Arizona State wasn't great, but anytime you got to go out to the desert, that's a tough game. Toledo was a really, really good team, a really good group of 5 team this year. So it is a tough slate start to finish for Mississippi State. I would say the one positive for them is the road games are spread out. Based off what I'm seeing outside of at Texas, at Georgia, those are thankfully separated for them by an open date. But that's the only time you have back-to-back road games in the schedule. But again, Mississippi State's 2024 slate is tough as any in the SEC. At number 4, guys, and I feel like for the upper echelon of the SEC, right, we don't talk about how tough their schedules are because of how good they are, right? I mean, I said it many times that Georgia's 2023 slate, that while I understand it was not as tough a slate as some others. Don't get me wrong. But you looked at that schedule, and I said to myself, are we saying that Georgia's schedule is easy because they don't play anybody good, or because Georgia is so much better than everyone else? So that's something you got to keep in mind. But it's interesting how the the upper echelon, the elites, the top tier teams in the SEC, they don't get any benefit of the doubt, right? Because, oh, you're so good. Who cares? Your schedule's no good. At number 4, guys, I've got Alabama. And you may say to yourself, really? Listen to this schedule. You open up Western Kentucky, South Florida, no big deal first 2 weeks. Then you're at Wisconsin, tricky non-conference game in week 3. Then you've got an open date. You open up SEC play with the Georgia Bulldogs in the final weekend of September. Granted, this is a game in Tuscaloosa, but still, Georgia is coming to town. Then you're at Vanderbilt, South Carolina, at Tennessee, Missouri. Then you've got your open date. Then you're at LSU, Mercer, at Oklahoma, and Auburn to close it out. Guys, that final stretch at Tennessee, Mizzou, open date, at LSU, you get the one breather against Mercer, but then at Oklahoma and Auburn to close it out. That's got to be one of the toughest finishing stretches in college football, right? So Bama's schedule in 2024 takes a back seat than 0-1. And that last stretch there, like I mentioned, guys, in the final month of the season or so, really, really difficult for the Crimson Tide. At number 3, I've got the Georgia Bulldogs, guys. You go look at their schedule. Nobody's going to be talking about how weak Georgia's schedule is in 2024. That is for sure, because you just look at the non-conference, guys. Georgia opens up neutral site game in Atlanta against the Clemson Tigers. That one's going to be a lot of fun. But you open up with Clemson. Then you got Tennessee Tech. Your SEC opener is at Kentucky. That'll be a tricky game. Georgia going up against their former quarterback and transfer Brock Vandagriff, who by all accounts is going to be the Kentucky Wildcats starting quarterback in 2024. Then you've got the open date. Then you're at Alabama. So your first 2 SEC games, guys, are at Kentucky and at Alabama. Then you've got Auburn, Mississippi State, at Texas, right? Auburn, Mississippi State, at Texas. Then you've got the open date. Then you got Florida and Jacksonville, at Ole Miss, Tennessee, UMass, and Georgia Tech. So, guys, listen to these road games. At Kentucky, at Bama, at Texas, at Ole Miss. And then your non-conference of Clemson. After that, it falls off, right? Tennessee Tech, Georgia Tech, and UMass. But opening up with Clemson in the non-conference, those road games, you do draw Texas, you do draw Alabama, an absolute gauntlet that Georgia will face in 2024. Thankfully for the Dogs, they do have Carson Beck returning. QB1 will lead them through that, but nobody is going to be talking about how weak Georgia's schedule is this next offseason. At number 2, we wondered whether the new members of the SEC, Oklahoma or Texas, would be welcomed rudely. I think it's safe to say that Oklahoma is getting the short end of the stick with their schedule. At number 2, I've got the Oklahoma Sooners. They do open up soft, guys. I say quote-unquote soft. They open up with Temple, Houston, and Tulane in the non-conference. Their SEC opener, September the 21st, against the Tennessee Volunteers in Norman. Then they go to Auburn, an open date. Then Texas in Dallas, of course, in the Red River rivalry. Then they have South Carolina, at Ole Miss, Maine, at Missouri. Then an open date. Then, guys, they finish, get this, Alabama in Norman on November 23rd, and then at LSU to close out the season on November the 30th. Guys, that schedule is insane, right? Houston's a quality program. Tulane, right? They were really good this year. That's a great group of 5 program. I mean, Tennessee's a really tough way to open SEC play. Having to go to Jordan-Hare for your first ever SEC road game, at least as a member of the SEC, that's absurd, right? Their rivalry with Texas, enough said. You do draw South Carolina at home, which could be a tricky game. At Ole Miss is a tough one. At Mizzou's a tough one. And then, like I mentioned, Bama and LSU back-to-back to close it out. I mean, the SEC did Oklahoma no favors when it comes to their first SEC schedule. And finally, guys, the toughest schedule in the SEC going into 2024. And, guys, this one is no surprise. And the hits keep coming for Billy Napier down in Gainesville because, guys, this 2024 slate, it had to be made by Kirby Smart himself. It had to be made by Georgia fans themselves because, my goodness, Florida may have the toughest schedule we've ever seen in SEC play. 11 Power 5 opponents on this schedule. 11 Power 5 opponents, guys. Let's go through this. You open up with Miami in Gainesville. Then you go Samford, Texas A&M is your SEC opener on September the 14th. That game, of course, and the Swamp. Then you go to Mississippi State. Then you have an open date. Here's where it gets fun. You got Central Florida at home, at Tennessee, Kentucky. Then an open date. Guys, listen to this closing stretch in the month of November. You've got Georgia and Jacksonville, at Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, finally at Florida State. That closing stretch of Georgia and Jacksonville, at Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, and at Florida State. There's not a tougher closing stretch in college football than what I just presented. Florida's 2024 slate, I mean, it's a murderer's row, guys. And for a coach in Billy Napier that's trying to bounce back from a really tough 5-win season, it's a pivotal year 3 for him, right? Trying to find some positive momentum. And I think, you ask Florida fans, what's the minimum expectation in year 3 of Billy Napier? What does Napier have to do? I mean, guys, if you say he's got to go 8-4 or better, how? Because right now, Florida is an underdog in every single one of those games down the stretch that I just mentioned. Georgia in Jacksonville, at Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, at Florida State. Florida's 2024 schedule is the gauntlet of all gauntlets. You've got that one non-conference game against Samford that you're like, check it off as a W. Guys, in the non-con, Miami, Central Florida, and at Florida State. Those games are at best toss-ups. And then the SEC slate that you have that is so unforgiving. Road games at Tennessee, Georgia in Jacksonville, at Texas, at Mississippi State. An absolute gauntlet awaits Billy Napier in year 3. So again, guys, my top 5 toughest schedules in 2024. At number 5, Mississippi State. At number 4, Alabama. At number 3, Georgia. Number 2, Oklahoma. And number 1, the Florida Gators. Guys, we're going to jump into a quick break. On the other side, we'll dive into the Citrus Bowl as Tennessee takes on Iowa on New Year's Day. I'll give my preview, my prediction, my breakdown for that ball game, guys. All that and more on the other side of this break. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow.
Muscle Dougie, ho. Marshall Dougie, ho.
Ladies and gents, boys and girls, we are back here on this Thursday, December the 21st, 2023. I want to say thank you all so much for the continued love and support. One of our last shows of the 2024 calendar year. Guys, stay tuned tomorrow and next week for updates. I know for a fact we will not have a show, obviously, Christmas Day or the 26th. So from after Friday, the next time we will go live will be Wednesday, December the 27th. Again, I'll keep you guys updated because things could change, right? Got family in town. We'll be visiting family for Christmas, what have you. And, of course, SEC Bowl season will begin next Wednesday as well. So, again, really, really excited for that. And just stay tuned for all the happenings, everything we have going on. Excited to kick the feet up, take some time, quote-unquote, off, obviously, and hang out with family and enjoy the Christmas season. I'm sure you guys are doing the same. I'm sure many of you have already hit the road or traveling, seeing family, all that good stuff. And I hope Santa Claus is good to you guys this year. Let me just say that. But anyways, guys, continue to flood the chat lines, your questions, your comments, all that good stuff. Your questions, your comments, your voicemails as well, guys. We'll take all of that after this next segment in our daily mailbag segment. It'll be a little bit longer than normal daily mailbag segment here on this Thursday. But again, guys, that being said, we keep the conversation rolling. Citrus Bowl as the Tennessee Volunteers take on the Iowa Hawkeyes on New Year's Day, January the 1st, a 1 p.m. Eastern time kickoff on ABC. This game taking place down at Camping World Stadium in Orlando, Florida. The line in this one, latest line coming from our friends over at scoresandodds.com. Tennessee is an 8.5-point favorite. The over-under set at 36.5. And guys, I didn't include this in my notes, but I feel like for me personally, and for many college football fans watching this game, the total has to be the top storyline here. Like if you're watching this game, one of the reasons I'll be tuned in outside of the fact that it's an SEC bowl game and I'm intrigued to just see how it plays out. But I don't know if this is fact, but it feels like it is. It feels as if the under has hit in every single Iowa football game this year. Like death taxes and the under when Iowa plays. Like, and they cannot set the under low enough. Guys, we've had some of our gambling picks where, I mean, we've taken under 24.5 or 27. I mean, some crazy low totals. Over under in this one, 36.5. With the way Iowa plays football, that feels astronomical. Like, is that the easiest bet of the college football bowl season? I mean, honestly, genuinely, is there an easier bet than under in this game? Because Iowa's got one of the, I think, actually the worst offense in college football. They field a great defense. I can't tell if Iowa is the worst 10-win team I've ever seen or if they're the best 10-win team because they've overcome a horrific offense. But either way, death taxes and the under when Iowa takes the field. Again, if nothing else from that perspective, that's why I'm excited to tune in and watch this game just to see, does the under hit again in an Iowa football game? Now, looking on the field, guys, our top storylines, you know what I think's interesting, right? We're talking quarterbacks. Joe Milton, I think more than likely is going to get the start for Tennessee. You know, what version of him do you get under center, right? We've seen Joe be really, really good at times and other times make you scratch your head and wonder what the heck is going on through his brain. But how much of Nico do we get? I know Tennessee fans are clamoring to see the prized five-star, the prized signee, if you will. He is the $8 million quarterback on Tennessee's roster and the guy that is the quarterback of the future. Let's call it for what it is for Tennessee. And bowl games present a great opportunity for him to showcase his talent, showcase his skill set, but you obviously want to win the football game too. So you wonder how much, if at all, does Josh Heupel feature Nico? Does he play at all? Do we see him trot out on the field and make an impact against Iowa, or is it more so the Joe Milton show and they're depending on Joe Milton and letting Bazooka Joe work one last time? Again, what version of Joe Milton do you get? Because we've seen the good, the bad, the ugly, right? We saw it all throughout the SEC season. So I just wonder at quarterback, what do you get against a really, really good Iowa defense? Now, on the Iowa side of things, realistically, guys, what can they do offensively? I mean, guys, you look at the numbers. It's insane. They averaged less than 250 yards per game offensively. There are many teams that average more than that passing, solely passing per game. Iowa dead last in offense, basically every single offensive category. They're going to have to score, right? I mean, I don't think anybody expects this to be some high-scoring shootout, if you will, but Iowa's going to have to, I know it sounds funny, score double digits to have a chance in this one. My question is Iowa capable of doing that? And I mean that with sincerity. I don't mean that to be funny. I don't mean that as a joke. Is Iowa capable of scoring in the double digits in this football game? Guys, I think what's interesting, too, the opt-outs. How do the opt-outs affect both these teams, specifically, though, Tennessee? Tyler Barron has hit the portal and since has committed to Ole Miss. Some other guys, who are they going to have available on the offensive side? How do the opt-outs affect Tennessee? Does that hold them back or limit what they can do in this football game? And also, guys, Iowa's going for history in this game, believe it or not. It'd be just the fourth time in school history that Iowa has reached 11 wins if they can get the win over Tennessee. And obviously, guys, on the Tennessee side of things, I don't think it was the season that Vol fans were hoping for, right, going 8-4. It wasn't a bad season after you lost Hendon Hooker, Jalen Hyatt at the wide receiver position. I mean, I don't think you look at it as some terrible season, but I don't know that it really met the expectations of Tennessee fans. But, hey, you win a 9th game in a bowl game. You win a New Year's Day bowl. I think there's still something to be said for that. You put together a fairly solid recruiting class. Maybe not exactly what Tennessee fans were hoping for, but you continue to build that positive momentum if you take down Iowa in this football game. And again, you go into the offseason with 9 wins, feeling really good about yourself. And I think it sets you up well for 2024. Makes everything better, obviously, when you're able to win that bowl game. And again, taking down a quality opponent in the Iowa Hawkeyes, a 10-win football team. Even though they've done it with defense and the offense has been terrible, it would not take away from how good of a win this would be for Tennessee. So with that being said, the prediction for this game, guys, I think this is going to be a low-scoring game. That goes without saying. I think under 36.5 is the most no-brainer bet in this game. I'm really tempted, to go Iowa plus 8.5, but I just cannot trust them offensively to do anything, right? We forget that Tennessee fields a really, really good front seven. Some inconsistencies in the back end, like a lot of other teams, but still a solid front seven. I think it's going to be really, really difficult for Iowa to move the football up and down the field, guys. Again, I think a lower scoring game. I'm fascinated to see, does the under hit yet again? I think it will. I think Iowa's defense will give Joe Milton some fits, but I think Tennessee will do just enough to put up enough offense to where this game will be out of reach for Iowa. So again, guys, I do think Tennessee gets the win. I think they notch their 9th win on the season. I like the Vols to win the Citrus Bowl, guys. Lock me in. Give me Tennessee 17, Iowa 6. And again, many of you will scoff at that score prediction like, man, like what a snoozer. But guys, these are the type of games that Iowa has played all season long. And so, like, why wouldn't I think that 36.5 number is crazy. I think that's crazy. I think under 36.5 is free money in this game. I think it's stealing, guys. Take everything you have and put it on the under 36.5. Because I'm also respecting their defense. Like Iowa's defense, very, very good defense. Tennessee, it's going to be a struggle to move the football. But I just don't see any way in which Iowa scores double digits in this game. So again, guys, I think Tennessee ends their season on a high note in Orlando. Give me Vols 17, Iowa 6 in the Citrus Bowl. Guys, we're going to jump into the break. On the other side, we dive into our daily mailbag, an extended daily mailbag today, as there's lots to get into, lots to discuss with your questions, your comments, your voicemails, and more on the other side of this break. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow.
Muscle Dougie, ho. Muscle Dougie, ho.
Ladies and gents, boys and girls, we are back here on this Thursday, December the 21st, 2023. Appreciate you all tuning in, guys. With that being said, the daily mailbag segment, excuse me, officially begins, my bad, here on this Thursday. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Your love, your support. Again, guys, really excited to take your questions, your comments, your voicemails. If you want to be a part of the show, you can give us a ring at 843-790-3377. Leave us your voicemails. Yeah, John, over the entire second hour, we are diving into that. Things slowing down a little bit, obviously, as we get into the Christmas holiday. You know, I thought about adding the segment today of like the biggest winners and losers from National Signing Day. And I think there's some that are really, really obvious, guys. I think there's some that are really obvious with, you know, like the struggles that Florida had, the struggles Florida had on signing day. You know, as Jake Crain said, like what Miami did on signing day, what Georgia did signing the offensive linemen they did, right? The guys in the trenches. So, but as I said yesterday too, guys, you just simply aren't going to know. You simply aren't going to know until 2-3 years down the road how good these recruiting classes are. So, anyways, yesterday was a lot of fun, guys. Yesterday was a blast in regards to talking all things signing day and breaking it all down. And really not a lot changed from after we spoke. South Carolina actually fell a couple spots from when we spoke about 1 o'clock or so yesterday, looking at the classes. Gamecocks finishing 20th overall and 11th in the SEC, which admittedly, guys, is lower than I thought they'd finish. I mean, I really will be honest with you. That's lower than I thought South Carolina would finish after their hot start to recruiting, but it is what it is. So anyways, guys, we're diving into your questions, your comments, your voicemails. 843-790-3377. You can call that number. You can text that number as well. Let's see. Edmund says USC always starts out quick in recruiting and portal moves, then they fade slowly. Well, I think too, Edmund, what happens is like you get one commitment or two commitments, or you know, it's a battle of you've got 5 commitments and everybody else has 1 or 2 commitments, and so like you're number 1 or you're number 3 or whatever. And yeah, by the end of it, certainly it all balances out, right? It all balances out, Edmund. So to your point, I think there's, you know, we're all guilty of it, but there's no reason in overreacting to what recruiting rankings are saying, you know, back in April. Because, like, you know, early on, I mean, I remember like in April, Alabama was like 29th, right? And they finished 2nd. So, I mean, the cream always rises to the top. Things always even themselves out, and the numbers always even themselves out, if you will. Let's see. Ethan K said to Jake, Merry Christmas, Jake. Thanks for all the laughs and hard work this year. Yeah, Jake was awesome this year, man. He was awesome last year, too. Hey, it's always a lot of fun. Billy Cotton, start out quick because we get 1 5-star player and then 4 stars and go down to 3 stars and unranked every year. That is why. Ethan K, what are the biggest holes in the roster still? I'd say O-line, receiver, and cornerback. I think wide receiver, Ethan, for sure. I think South Carolina could use another edge or two. Yeah, I would say corner is a good one. And then offensive line, I mean, to your point, man, Ethan, listen, you lose Jalen Nichols. I think it's funny to watch college fans cope with news like that and how they choose to cope of, oh, not a big loss. I mean, dude, every time somebody enters the transfer portal, I see people commenting, no, they got to like let you know, not a big loss, not a big loss. It's not a big loss. Like Jalen Nichols started in 2021 and 2022 and was regarded as your best offensive lineman coming back in 2023, guys. To say that that's not a big loss at all, I just disagree, man. I disagree. I wholeheartedly disagree. So I think offensive line, Ethan K., I think you'd be well served to add 2 or 3 more guys. And guys, I'm going to tell you right now what's going to happen, and you're going to hate to hear this. But what's going to happen if South Carolina doesn't do that? You guys can preach to the high heavens till you're blue in the face that, man, the only reason the offensive line stunk this year was because of the injuries and this and that. But guys, if you bring back the same group of guys and all you did was add some freshmen, very talented, but you added some freshmen. If you bring back the same group of guys, that was one of the worst offensive lines in the SEC, and you don't add anybody else, guys, South Carolina's getting picked to go 5-7 again. That's bottom line. They are. They are. Because how much better truly can that group be? I mean, I got people on social media saying, just start the best play, start the freshmen. Like, guys, you saw how starting freshmen worked out this year. I know guys were freshman All-Americans. I know you had a freshman of the week, but like, let's be honest. Big Tree, Trovon Bowe, those guys got put through the ringer. And I mean, they had their moments of, I mean, who can forget the Tennessee game? You know, I mean, we're talking about an offensive line that averaged giving up 4 sacks a week. So I don't understand the logic of, well, we'll just get healthy and not add anyone. Guys, this is South Carolina football, and it's football in general. Like, injuries are going to happen. I think at this point, you just have to account for it. You're going to have some injuries. You better make sure you have a plan. I know you're not going to have 10 or 11, or you hope not, injuries, but you got to have a plan, man. You got to have a plan. I don't think just, well, let's just go into the 2024 season. Same dudes in the room. I mean, I don't know, man. I would not operate that way. I would not operate that way. Let's see. Getting back into your questions. John Edward, it's Christmas season. Find some joy, says John Edward. John Edward saying, find some joy. My goodness. Indeed. Billy Cotton says, Akron, Old Dominion, maybe Vanderbilt only see 3 to 4 wins next year for Carolina. 50 years being a fan. Family all went to USC. Just a drinking fest in the fall. They can't make them strong enough, Billy. You can't make them strong enough. Cody says this, it's Nico time in Tennessee. Milton experiment in Knoxville was a failure this year. Hashtag Go Big Orange. Was it a failure, Cody? I mean, I think Joe Milton was just what most folks expected. I mean, I will say this, Cody. I think Joe Milton served as a great bridge quarterback for Tennessee. I don't think Joe Milton, I mean, I think if you had expectations of Joe Milton being great or matching what Hendon Hooker did, I think those expectations were a bit misguided. I think that's what it really comes down to, Cody. I just think that, you know, we're talking about a guy in Joe Milton that was a guy who had lost multiple quarterback battles before. I mean, what was his ceiling? I mean, did Joe Milton not reach his ceiling this year? I mean, he was pretty close. That's what I'm trying to say. He was pretty close. So, to your point, Cody, I mean, I think bowl games are a great opportunity to begin to build for the future. I guess Joe Milton, yes, is playing in the bowl game for sure. But I wonder if selfishly, if Tennessee fans are like, man, I wish he wasn't playing, because it's like then you could get a head start on what the future is going to be in Knoxville. So I really do think it's fascinating. I do think it's fascinating. But, you know, I think Joe Milton, he wasn't great by any means, but I didn't expect him to be great. I just thought he'd be a nice bridge quarterback. And listen, Cody, what has to excite you, I would think, as a Tennessee fan, if you're establishing a floor of 8 wins, like, hey, 8 wins is going to be our bad year, after what Tennessee football endured for over a decade, that's a pretty good place to be. That's not a bad place to be, is it? I mean, it could be much worse, as Tennessee fans have seen firsthand. Luke Grubb says, excluding the bye, you cannot argue South Carolina's schedule is ridiculous. Ole Miss, at Bama, at Oklahoma, and A&M. I mean, Luke, for sure, South Carolina's schedule's tough. And when we did those schedule rankings, there are many out there that can certainly argue that their schedule is one of the toughest, no doubt. But, yeah. So, I mean, I just, you know, It's certainly a tough schedule. It just didn't make my top 5. It was right there. It was close, though. It was close. Texter says, as long as the O-line gets sorted out, I think running game will be dangerous next year with Sellers at the helm. Yeah, I mean, certainly when you got a quarterback like that that's got that dual threat capability. I guess, guys, it's just, isn't it crazy to think that, because let's face it, next year, and let's just say 2025, I mean, they're massively important. I mean, I think the future of the Shane Beamer era in Columbia rests on these next 2 seasons. Maybe it rests on 2024 alone. And so effectively what you're saying is the future of the Shane Beamer era rests on Lenoris Sellers. That's what it comes down to. Does Lenoris Sellers turn into what folks expect him to be? That's going to determine Shane Beamer's tenure in Columbia. I mean, really, truly. Am I wrong? It's all about getting the most out of Lenoris Sellers. That's what it'll come down to. Let's see. Chuck Burkett, JC said if not for the spring game injury, Jalen Nichols would have already been gone. UNC meddling. Yeah, Chuck, I heard that as well. Actually months ago about Jalen Nichols, but the expectation was he was going to be back in 2024. So I don't know what happened. Maybe UNC came back in, swooped him up, whatever, but I don't know, man. Bruin Nation, I appreciate you tuning in, man. Thank you so much for the love and support, man. It's you'll see everything on social media, obviously, in due time. And I know you and I have had conversation behind the scenes, but appreciate your love and support, man. Truly, it means the world. Justin says, Chris, with Shane Height with his class and the most talented in school history in the lackluster season and expecting to have at minimum bowl games, could that fuel for him to have a hot seat next year? Basically, Justin asking, could Shane Beamer's seat get hot next year? Yeah. If you miss a bowl game, absolutely. Absolutely. Austin Gregory with Tonka, Boogie, and Tuazama returning. Were you surprised with how much Beamer and company brought in on the defensive line? Absolutely not, Austin Gregory. Number one, let's just be frank. Drew Tuazama was did he have a tackle in 2023, man? A non-impact pickup. I hate to tell you, Austin, there's some guys you pick up and they turn into superstars. There's some guys you pick up and they turn into contributors. There's some guys you pick up and you never hear from again. Drew Tuazama is a guy that I don't think you can factor him in as he's not SEC. Just bottom line. I mean, Drew Tuazama is not a guy you want to be relying on week after week. That's what we saw. That's at least what we saw in the field in 2023. So am I surprised? I mean, Austin Gregory, look at the results on the field. No, I think you can't have enough good defensive linemen. You can't have enough good pass rushers. And I hate to be taking, not necessarily a shot at Drew Tuazama, but I mean, Austin, would you say he was some big-time impact contributor out of the portal? I mean, that guy didn't even hardly play. So I don't know that you can really factor him in. So anyways, no, to answer your question, no, I'm not surprised at all that they're bringing in defensive linemen. Not surprised at all because you can't have enough good ones. John Edward, thoughts on Jaden McGowan's comments? John Edward, the whole Jaden McGowan thing is just, I mean, it's a mess. I mean, to the point many folks are making. Like, it feels like we're making a mountain out of a molehill in the sense of and I know that some, let me just say this. I never threw a parade learning the news that Jaden McGowan was coming to South Carolina. Nice pickup, but Vandy wide receiver, right? So whether the Gamecocks get him or not, I don't think that's the difference in them winning 2 or 3 more games in 2024. Let me just say that. So I think we're making a lot of nothing. If he wants to go to Boston College, so be it, is what it is. I mean, it is strange to see NIL flips, but that's the world of college football that we are in. So, I mean, I don't know. It's a he said, she said argument about is he going for more money? Is he going for this, that, whatever? Just let the kid do whatever he wants. Who gives a damn at this point, man? I mean, who really cares? So, he said, she said. Ruination says, because if they change his game, they deserve to be fired. Let the man do his thing. Ruination, should they coach him up? Should they coach him up, my guy? Let's see. Now, I know what you're saying. Let's see. Austin Miller, as much as I like Beamer, I think if he misses another bowl game, I think he should be gone. Mediocre football shouldn't be acceptable here any longer. I mean, Austin, you know, I have not gone on record and saying that, and I'm not going to do so because I think how it happens is very, very important. I'll just put it to you this way. I'll say this. 5-7 or better, and I think Shane Beamer is back next year. Now, I'm not telling you what I think should happen. I'm telling you what I think will happen. 5-7 or better, Shane Beamer's back. If you go 4-8 or worse, all bets are off. I have no idea what to think. Because, guys, you look at the 2024 schedule. 4 wins are built in. 4 wins are literally built in with Old Dominion, Akron, Wofford, and Vandy. Vandy's got to be counted as a built-in win, right? If you're losing to Vandy, that should tell you enough right there. So 4 wins are built in. So to get to a bowl game, I know the schedule's a gauntlet, but to get to a bowl game, you got to go 2-6 in those 8 games. The other 8 games, you got to go 2-6. I mean, guys, if you can't go 2-6, if you go 1-7 in those 8 games, I'm just saying, man. Cody Larmer says it's not a recipe for success to start freshmen on the offensive line. Will they be talented for you all? Yes, in the future. I think especially the SEC, you want them sitting for 2 years. Cody, you absolutely do. The ideal position to be in, Cody, is to be starting redshirt juniors and redshirt seniors on the offensive line. That's where you want to be, Cody. That's where you want to be. Austin Gregory says, to me, the Clemson game next year is very important. Of course, it's always important, but especially next year when either Beamer can tie his series against them at 2-2 or Dabo takes a 3-1 lead. Certainly, Austin, that game, to your point, always important. I mean, you don't have to overemphasize the importance, right? But yeah, I mean, I think if you're going to turn the tide, you know, we saw in recruiting, South Carolina landed a bunch of in-state guys. Clemson only got 1. Clemson didn't finish that much higher than South Carolina in recruiting. You know, the only way to turn a rivalry, though, is beat them. You got to beat them, right? You got to beat them, Austin. So certainly a huge game. Certainly a huge game, no doubt. Let's see. Big wash. Cody's right, but we're in a win now situation. Can't afford to let freshman linemen learn on the job. Here's my conundrum, guys, when it comes to, you ask about the 2024 season. It's year 4 of Beamer. And here's the conundrum, okay? Here's the conundrum. The conundrum is this. Do I think Shane Beamer's back in Columbia in 2025 after a 5-7 season? Yes, I do. Do I think there should probably be a change if South Carolina goes 5-7 or worse? Probably. Any other program with expectations, guys, would make a move. Any other program. And not many coaches survive back-to-back missed bowl games in the SEC. It just doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. I mean, I think I'll put it to you this way. For the sake of Shane Beamer's future in Columbia, long-term future, making a bowl game feels like a must, right? If you don't make a bowl game, then you put your fate in the hands of how liked am I? How much do people like me? How much do people like my culture? How much do people like my, the way I am? Because I tell you this again, nobody's immune to the effects of losing, man. Nobody's immune to it. Absolutely nobody. I mean, the way that a lot of the Gamecock fan base turned on Shane Beamer this year was something to see. I mean, a lot. And I'm talking about people that are as garnet glasses as any. I saw more folks being critical about Shane Beamer on social media than I ever thought I would see. So, no coach is immune to the effects of losing. That includes Shane Beamer. Guys, we're going to jump into a quick break. On the other side, we'll keep it rolling. Your questions, comments, voicemails, and more here on this Thursday. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow.
Marshall Dougie, ho. Marshall Dougie, ho.
Ladies and gents, boys and girls, we are back here on this Thursday, December the 21st, 2023. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. We're diving right back into your questions, your comments, your voicemails. We do have a text here. Texter says, "What's up, Chris? It's the Hall of Famer, Robbie Davis. I still think it's going to end up being Texas and Bama, the national title. Also, my prediction for the basketball game tomorrow, South Carolina 75, Elon 68. Go Gamecocks. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and, of course, happy early birthday." Thank you, Robbie Davis. Appreciate that so much, my friend. Merry Christmas to you and yours early, of course. Happy New Year. Really appreciate you, Robbie, and the entire Robbie Davis gang, if you will. Let's jump back into your questions. Austin Gregory, outside of Rocket Sanders, who you most excited about that South Carolina snagged out of the portal? He says for him, it's Brady Hunt, the Ball State tight end. I'd probably go, Austin, with Kyle Kennard, the edge out of Georgia Tech. I just think that's a position where South Carolina desperately needed help, Austin. I think Jordan Strawn is gone, right? Isn't he gone? Somebody can correct me in the chat. Bottom line is South Carolina needs help on the edge front. They need pass rushers. And so I think Kyle Kennard, the Jules kid from Pitt as well up front. I always get excited to see beefing up the interior, beefing up both lines of scrimmage, and, of course, that edge spot. I thought Kennard was a really good pickup for them. So excited for him. That's probably the one I'm most excited for. I think Jared Brown at Coastal is one to be excited about. I think Oscar Attaway and, the running back depth is exciting. So let's see. Travis says in his presser, Beamer stated this is the first time in 16 seasons he isn't getting ready for a bowl game. He didn't smile. We aren't either, Coach. I hear you. Yeah, I mean, for sure, that was interesting to hear, man. First time Beamer's ever missed a bowl game in his coaching career. So, Austin Gregory, I know you've seen it, but have you touched on the Chip Kelly Solutions to Fix College Football video? What were your takeaways? Admittedly, Austin, I have not watched the full video start to finish, but I know he talked about college football having its own commissioner and governing body and breaking away from the NCAA. I mean, I think that's a must. I think that's absolutely a must. I think that's necessary. Yeah, I think that absolutely needs to happen. It makes no sense there's not like a commissioner of some sort, right? It just makes no sense. Anyways. Guys, 843-790-3377. That's 843-790-3377. You can call that number, text that number, whatever you like. Chuck Burkett says, if we don't win at least 7 games next year, you can promote me to Chief Slapdick. Will do, Chuck. Will do. Travis says, hopefully that Desmond Umeozulu will blossom next season. I mean, Travis, he has to. He has to. I mean, listen, man, let's be honest with ourselves. You look at the recruiting rankings, right, Travis? You look at the recruiting rankings, and South Carolina's not at the top. They're not in the top 5. They're not in the top 10 nationally, top 5 in the SEC. That doesn't mean you don't get good players. That's absolutely not what that means. But what it means, I think, guys, is you're not getting as many good players as the top teams are. So the good players you get, you got to maximize their potential, man. You got to maximize their talent. You got to get the most out of them. So a guy like Desmond Umeozulu, you can't afford to miss on him. You can't afford for him to not pan out. That's why it's so painful. People wonder, like, why does it hurt so bad when a Marshawn Lloyd or a Jordan Burch or these guys hit the portal? It's because, guys, South Carolina's a program. You don't get that many 5 stars. Let's call it for what it is. It's not like you're getting 5 or 6 a year. You're getting 1, and this year was the first time ever you got 2, and one of them was an offensive lineman. So, I mean, you can't afford to miss on those guys. You can't. But the thing that Shane Beamer has to do, because, guys, I'll be honest with you, and again, you won't hear this from anyone else. You won't hear this from the 24/7 guys. You won't hear this from the On3 guys. Anybody else, the Rivals folks, you won't hear it because they're going to continue to sell hope to you, and they want you to subscribe, and they're going to say what they need to for you to pay that $9.99 a month and for them to tell you what you want to hear. That's totally fine. And I'm not saying that's always the case, but in recruiting, guys, I'm not talking about South Carolina either. I'm talking about the overall industry as a whole. Again, have we ever heard any recruiting service go on record and say, that class was all right? That class was okay. Couple contributors, but nothing wild. No real difference makers. I thought this was kind of a questionable take. This guy probably won't have much of an impact. It was just an okay class. Nobody says that. At least those who are affiliated with those recruiting services don't say that. So bringing that back to South Carolina, guys, if you want my honest reaction to the recruiting class, everything I said yesterday, I stand behind. I think they did a good job addressing needs, in the trenches, obviously getting those offensive linemen, those defensive linemen. I think they did a good job with that. Dylan Stewart, the headliner, that's a huge one, addressing the edge spot. But if you look at the numbers, guys, stars aren't everything. They're not. They're not. Recruiting rankings aren't everything. But they typically tell the tale, right? The blue chip ratio, that exists for a reason. And you look at the teams that are winning the most games, guess what? They got the most good players. So what I see when I see South Carolina 20th nationally and 11th in the SEC, guys, admittedly, I think South Carolina is recruiting how they always have. I mean, I think Shane Beamer's doing a good job, don't get me wrong, but South Carolina has never had a problem at recruiting. Like, they've always recruited at a top 25 clip. As long as I can remember. I don't remember South Carolina ever not being in the top 25 in recruiting. They've always recruited at a top 25 clip. That's not their problem, right? That's not their problem. And until South Carolina's winning 8 or 9 games a year at minimum, guys, you're not going to break into that top 15 or top 10 mold. Because here's the problem. Look at an Auburn, for example. They finished 4th in the SEC this year, 7th nationally. You say to yourself, how can they do it? Auburn hadn't been good. Well, they got Hugh Freeze, but also what Auburn has, guys, at South Carolina, a school like South Carolina doesn't, they have history, man. They have tradition. They have a trophy case that they can sell to prospects. South Carolina does not have that. They've also got incredible NIL backing. I would probably say it's a better situation than that in Columbia. But here's the point I wanted to make. Shane Beamer's recruiting fine. He's recruiting well. I don't think he's doing much different than anything that's ever been done, but he's recruiting well, okay? 20th nationally, 11th in the SEC, 12th in the transfer portal right now. Whether it be Shane Beamer, whether it be the next coach, it be the next coach, or it be the next coach. To win at South Carolina, being an elite recruiter is just not good enough. It's not. Because your ceiling is only so high, at least for now, until you start winning games and winning big games. You have to be a master talent evaluator and a master talent developer. Will Muschamp got talent, guys. Look back at the recruiting classes. Will Muschamp got talent year after year after year. I mean, heck, Will Muschamp signed one of the highest rated prospects in school history in Jordan Birch. I mean, the thoughts on Will Muschamp was he could sell ice to an Eskimo. I mean, Gamecock fans, when Muschamp was there, would tell you that he's a great recruiter. He's an elite recruiter. What did Muschamp not do? He didn't develop the talent. He didn't put the talent in the best possible position to succeed. That's what he didn't do. That was his shortcoming. So, with Shane Beamer and company, they're going to have to be elite at developing talent and finding the right guys that fit. Because, guys, they're recruiting no differently than South Carolina ever has. And I know that, people will tell you this is the best pound-for-pound class, and it's one of the best classes in school history. But, guys, forgive me. I see 20th nationally and 11th in the SEC. And some will say that means I don't know ball. But those numbers, guys, over you stack classes on classes, like typically those numbers work themselves out. I think there are contributors in this class, no doubt. My point being, though, that like the top 4-star guys you brought in, like you have to get the most out of them. You have to get the most out of them. Because you don't have 25 stars in this class and, well, we're just going to have, we just got elite depth and it's Jimmys and Joes that'll carry us. Like, you got to be able to scheme the X's and O's. And I think, too, it's what makes Beamer's decisions on the coaching staff so imperative. Because if you don't have the right coaches, you got to have some coaches that can scheme it up and that can develop. You got to have those. You got to have those assistants. You have to have those assistants. Texter says, Chris Kevin here. I really enjoy your show. I'm not as giddy about this class as some are. I don't care where we are nationally, but we are good. But where we are in the SEC, this class, as good as it is still 9th or so in the SEC. And we're behind Clem Sucks as well. Need to do better, just being real. No, listen, I think that's very real, man. Again, recruiting is such a thing. I mean, I've learned the hard way, guys. Trust me, I've learned the hard way. It's tough to make a living being critical about recruiting, right? Because they're still kids at the end of the day, and it's frowned upon. Bottom line, it is frowned upon in the college football world to have a take. Like if I went on here today, guys, and I was like, this kid, not a good pickup. I don't know why South Carolina wasted an offer on this guy. How do you think that would go over? Not even saying I want to do that because I don't, but I feel like folks aren't willing to be critical when it comes to recruiting. I mean, for example, you look at Florida, you look at Billy Napier, like the criticism's warranted after the way they finished. So, I mean, I ask you, and I'm curious, I guess, what the mood is of Gamecock Nation when it comes to this recruiting class. Because again, I think one of the reasons it was ranked lower, number one, you only added 16 new players, right, from the high school ranks. Number two, a lot of them were offensive linemen, and those guys just typically aren't going to be super highly rated, although one of them is a 5-star, Josiah Thompson. But, I mean, finishing 11th in the SEC is not inspiring. It's not exactly inspiring. So, we'll see. All I'm saying is, let me put it to you this way. I think South Carolina is recruiting well enough to where you should be able to win 7 to 8 games a year. But for the Gamecocks to get to the next level, for the Gamecocks to start talking about, hey, 12-team expanded playoff, college football playoff appearances, for them to get to the next level, they've either got to start really crushing it in the portal or they've got to start recruiting at a higher clip. Or option number 3, they've got to start developing the hell out of the talent they have on the roster, and Shane Beamer's got to go out and get some legitimate assistant coaches. One of those 3 things, if not all 3, need to happen for South Carolina. Guys, until then, the Gamecocks are a 500 program. Flat out. Until then, the Gamecocks are a 500 program. That's it. So you got to do one of those 3 things, if not all 3. If not all 3. You got to do one of those 3 things, if not all 3. So I just and also too, here's the other thing too. You've got to hope and pray and keep your fingers crossed that Lenoris Sellers is truly the answer at quarterback. I mean, that's the biggest thing, right? Having the right quarterback can change a lot. Having the right quarterback can change a lot, man. It can get people fired up to come to your school. It can help recruiting. It helps everything. It helps everything. Ruination. Great point here. If I can grab the mouse. From Bruin Nation, he says, Chris, what have I been saying for months? You better have the right coaches to coach who you got if you ain't getting the studs. Bruin Nation, to your point, man. If you're not pulling in 5-star after 5, here's the thing. If your roster isn't as good as the roster you're playing against, as the guys on the other side of the field, you better have the coaching advantage. You better have the coaching advantage. You got to have that. And so I'm very, very curious to see what the changes are for Beamer, if any. I thought Jake Crain's comments, guys, were very interesting. Jake Crain saying on our show that, Shane Beamer saying, hey, we haven't made a bowl game in 16 years, or we haven't missed a bowl game in 16 years. This is unacceptable. To Jake Crain's point, if you make no changes, you are saying it's acceptable. So, Anyways, guys, I think the reason I get it, right? I get it why it's frowned upon to be critical of recruiting because, if you say something negative about a recruit or a recruiting class and they turn out to be great, you just look like an asshole. And it's still looked at as, you should be grateful that a player is going to a certain school. But I mean, guys, it's a business now. It's a business more than ever. Guys are getting signed to 1-year contracts. They're getting signed to contracts to go to schools. Like, we can be honest about talent, right? We can be honest about recruiting classes. We can be honest about all this stuff. I mean, that's why for years I've pissed so many people off, because I've always viewed it from like this pro sports mindset or just this real mindset of, there are some signings that are great. There are some that are not. It is what it is. There are some signings that are not. And it's okay to be transparent about that. Listen, some guys are clubhouse guys. If you don't know what a clubhouse guy is, it's a guy that a pro organization keeps around, like in AAA or AA. He's never going to play or get promoted, but he's good for the clubhouse. He's a culture guy, right? Keeps spirits high in the clubhouse. He's not really ever going to play a significant role, but he's important for camaraderie. He's important for the dynamic of the locker room. There are guys like that you add. So anyways, it's a very interesting dynamic for sure. It's a very interesting dynamic for sure. John Edwards says, Beamer's either waiting till after the new year or maybe the coaches needed better players. I mean, John Edward, I think if you don't make any coaching changes, that would be a massive mistake. Flat out. And you know why? You know why it would, John Edward? You know why it would? For the optics of it. The way it would look. Especially if you go 5-7 or 6-6 next year with the same group of coaches. You're just not going to get a lot of grace, man. You're not going to get a lot of grace. You're not. Guys, 843-790-3377. We're going to roll through till 2 o'clock, taking your questions, your comments, and your voicemails here on this Thursday. Appreciate you all tuning in. Brewer Nation said, that's why if Beamer fails next season, you don't wait. Go hire Jamie Chadwell. So Brewer Nation says, hey, I got a plan if Beamer don't work. Again, guys, I just want to echo what I was saying about the recruiting class, because I want to make it clear. I'm not saying this is a terrible recruiting class. I think there's difference makers. I think there's contributors. But all I'm saying, and I think Brewer Nation did a good job of sort of rewording this point, maybe even better than I said it. But all I'm saying is, if you're not, when you're recruiting 11th best in the SEC and you're 20th nationally, and what's more important, again, is the SEC rankings. Who cares about national rankings? You're 11th in the SEC. And I don't care if you're 10th or you're 9th. So whatever service you're using, when you're recruiting at the bottom half, you better be able to coach them up, man. You better be able to coach them up. Because coaching hires at places like Alabama and Georgia and LSU, Texas, those are important, right? They're obviously very important. But guys, when you're the Missouris and the Kentuckys and the South Carolinas and the Mississippi States of the world, boy, you better make sure you got the right coaches in there. Because you're not playing with the same deck that those guys are playing. You better make sure you got your ace in the hole. You better make sure you've got guys that can identify talent, that can develop talent, that can truly find those diamonds in the rough. Because that's how you're going to win. Missouri's done such a great job of that. Kentucky over the years has done such a great job of that. And the way Shane Beamer at South Carolina, for example, is recruiting right now, guys, it's the same as South Carolina has always recruited, which isn't bad, but we all know the history of Gamecocks football. So you better be able to crush in the portal, and you better be able to develop, and you better have the right coaches in there who can maximize the talent, develop the talent, and put you in the best possible position to win. Because you're not out recruiting Georgia. You're not out recruiting Tennessee. You're not out recruiting Ole Miss. You're not out recruiting many of the schools you play on a yearly basis. You're not out recruiting Clemson, guys. You better make sure you can out-coach them. Bottom line. That's it. So, let's see. I know I just went on a bit of a rant there, guys, but I wanted to make sure I got my point across because somebody's going to go out there on social media and say, Chris thinks the recruiting class sucks. It's like, no, it doesn't. It doesn't. But it's not that the recruiting class sucks. It's that the SEC is insane. I mean, it's just – and, guys, again, like Auburn, they have the infrastructure to where, like, they've won titles. They've got a rich history. And they finished fourth in the recruiting in the SEC. And the reason for that is because, again, they can sell all that, right? South Carolina can't do that. Do I think the Gamecocks could recruit in the top half of the SEC yearly? I think it's possible, but I think the Gamecocks would have to be winning 8 to 9 games a year. I think you'd realistically have to be knocking on the door of college football playoffs. Or like Ole Miss. They finished 10th, I think, in recruiting. Barely ahead of South Carolina, but we all see what they've done in the portal. I mean, guys, that's the other thing, too. Again, the dust hasn't settled, so I'm not ready to, we'll go through every SEC team, talk about the transfer portal and what the, who were winners, who were losers. Rocket Sanders was a great pickup. Outside of that, you have to sell people on why it's a good pickup. Do you not? Who else is a guy that just jumps out like, that's a good pickup? That's a no-brainer good pickup. I mean, Rocket's the only guy, guys. Maybe Oscar Attaway behind him at North Texas. He was pretty good. I think that's a good one. Of course, Kyle Kennard and Jules on the defensive side, right? But South Carolina's 12th in the transfer portal. So, I mean, it's lots of work to be done. The bottom line is this. You've got to be able to coach them up. You have to, man. You can't – let me put it to you this way. You can't go till week 5 or 6 without knowing who RB1 is. You can't have some of the personnel question marks that you had in 2023. You can't do it, man. You can't do it. I mean, I'm gonna tell you right now, guys. It's no knock on the kid. But, man, if Luke Doty's starting at wide receiver next year, I'm going to have some real questions about this coaching staff. I mean, I'm going to tell you right now, if Luke Doty's starting at wide, if he's wide receiver 3 or 4, I'm going to have some real questions about this coaching staff, man. Because I tell you what, loyalty's a great thing, man. Loyalty's a great thing. But, man, the most loyal team ain't the best team. I hate to tell you. The most loyal team ain't normally the best team. We wish it was like that. But it's not. You got to go play the best 11. And if you can't develop any of those young wide receivers, and I mean, I know I'm picking on Luke Doty, guys, but I mean, it's just the truth. If he's a starting wide receiver, man, I'm going to really question the coaching staff and their ability to develop talent because apparently you've identified it and brought it on campus. Why is it not getting developed? Why? So, I just a lot of question marks for Gamecocks football going into 2024, which 'tis the season, I guess. I mean, that's just the nature of the beast, man. It's crazy, guys. I really don't know how, to a degree. I don't know how Gamecock fans of like 30, 40 years, how they don't just go insane. I really don't. I really don't. Because it's the same thing every year. Like a lot of these questions are the same questions. They're the same questions. Like I find myself, I feel like I'm in it's like deja vu every year. So dogs are ready to play. Anyways, man. Chuck Burkett, just like Napier, Herman, Fuente, etc. How'd those coaching wishes turn out? We have the right guy. He actually loves Carolina and wants to be here, but I'll agree he needs to become a better CEO. Again, Chuck Burkett. I know that when Beamer was hired, he was the proverbial hug this fan base needed, right? South Carolina needed a guy that made them feel good and warm and fuzzy. But guys, I got to be honest, man. Like, as long as a coach wins, I don't give a damn if he wants to be at the school or not. I really don't. Like that, the whole, well, he wants to be here and he loves it like we do. Like that doesn't mean much to me. Like, I mean, do you think, Chuck, do you think that's going to save his job if it gets to a point where you're in that? I mean, Brewer Nation, I've heard you repeat the same shit for 5 years. Brewer Nation, I don't know how to take that as a compliment or you're just acknowledging that fact. But I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. Brewer Nation, to the point, he says, tired of being hugged, choke me with wins. Brewer Nation, I thought, honestly, in case y'all missed it, I thought Brewer Nation had one of the best posts. And Brewer Nation, you can, if you want to bring it back up, I'm going to probably butcher it, but I'm going to paraphrase. Brewer Nation said something like, so we've tried winning with love and above all else, love your brother and all that. Now can we try what? Brewer Nation, pull up this tweet. Can you please post that in the chat? That was one of the best tweets I've ever seen. One of the best posts. It's not a tweet anymore. I loved that though. I was like that just hits the nail on the head of how Gamecock fans feel. Really, truly. R says you'd want to be here too if you were getting paid $6 million a year. Austin Miller, I still think Harbor should be at the edge spot. I mean, I think he wants to play wide receiver, Austin. That's the big thing. He's a receiver. I mean, I don't think he's going to want to go to defense anytime soon. Brewer Nation, wait till Beamer makes Doty QB1. And I go full metal John Edward Kruger. You know, Brewer Nation, I got to be honest. From what I heard Beamer say yesterday, I don't think Doty's much of a factor, man, in the quarterback competition. I mean, I just he was asked about, you know, the competition and about Luke Doty specifically, and literally said, you know, he's focused on wide receiver special teams, but he'll be in the quarterback room some. Like, that doesn't sound like a guy to me that you were preparing to be a starter in the Southeastern Conference. It doesn't. It doesn't. So, I guys, I don't know who South Carolina is going to go get, but I think you're going to go see them add at minimum one, probably two quarterbacks. I think you're going to see them add a couple quarterbacks just for depth. Just for depth. Chuck Burkett, no, I don't, Chris, but at South Carolina, given our 100-year history, it's going to take time to build it. Just my take, but thanks. I mean, Chuck, I would love to tell you, Chuck, lock in with Beamer for a decade. I really would, because to your point, Chuck, I don't think there's going to be a coach out there that gives it a better effort and takes it more personally than Beamer does. But the problem, Chuck, is none of that matters if you don't win. And it's just, you can't ignore losing forever. You just can't do it. You just can't do it. You just can't do it. Brewer Nation, here it is. He says, we've obviously failed at love, joy, and culture. Can we now try tampering, money, and winning? I mean, that is the best. That is the best post, Brewer Nation. That's the post of 2023 right there. That really is when it comes to Gamecocks football. We've obviously failed at love, joy, and culture. Can we now try tampering, money, and winning? That's just the reality, man. That's the reality. It is what it is. That's what it is. That's what it is. I love that. I think it's true. It's true. It's true. Bruce says, at least our basketball teams are good. Yeah, South Carolina men's takes on Elon tomorrow. I'm not sure when the women play again, but they're crushing, as you would expect. Guys, basketball content will increase as we get into January. SEC play begins. Football starts to take more of a back seat as bowl games get behind us and that sort of thing. So I promise you, I'm not just ignoring basketball, but you get to a point where, I'm 10Xing in life and business and content, focusing on the 20% that's most important, kind of letting go of the 80% that's not as important. And so when you talk about content, you got limited space, you got limited time, it's just tough to get into non-conference basketball. But I promise you, we will touch on basketball in January. So Brewer Nation, here's a great way to go out. We'll actually go with two, Chuck Burkett and then Brewer Nation. Travi, I appreciate you, my friend. Have a great rest of your day as well. Chuck Burkett says, took the great Steve Spurrier 6 years, but I totally agree. You can't wait forever. Brewer Nation says, final comment of the day, give me a winning program, strippers, drugs, and hoes as long as I can see championships. Brewer Nation, we can be Blue Mountain State for all I care, man. As long as we're winning championships, that's all that matters, man. That's all that matters. Guys, we've hit 2 o'clock. Hey, appreciate you all tuning in, guys. Be sure, again, you hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Hit that bell icon so you get notifications of when we go live, when we drop new video content as well. Also, be sure to hit that subscribe button on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. And, of course, guys, stay tuned on social media. Content bleeding out of the eyeballs. And, of course, do not forget, we are live tomorrow, noon to 2, our final show before the Christmas holiday. Really exciting stuff. Guys, appreciate you all tuning in. Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your Thursday, and we will talk to you all tomorrow.